Welcome everyone. My name is Drew Remiker and I work here at NovoEd, and we're very excited today to start our webinar series with our friends from IDEO U, Em and Dave. And the title of today's presentation is called Experiments in Engagement. So in terms of the format of this webinar, we're basically going to have two parts. The first is a 20-minute presentation from IDEO U, and then I'll be answering questions along the way. And hopefully we'll get to some of your questions via the chat in the last 10 minutes of the presentation. Just some basic ground rules is that we are going to be answering questions that you send in via the chat, and they'll be visible only to us. And then we'll select the ones that are really relevant to everyone, and we'll try to address them at the end. And if we don't get to them, we'll follow up via email to send you those final responses, and we'll also be sending you a webinar recording at the end of this presentation, and you should have everything you need. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our friends from IDEO U.
Thanks, Drew. Good morning, you guys. Thanks for joining us. Dave and I are really excited to be here to share a little bit more about the work that we're doing with IDEO U through IDEO. I'm going to kick us off, and just before we jump into what we're actually going to tell you, we're just going to give a brief overview of what IDEO U and IDEO are all about. So like Drew said, the theme of the webinar is experiments in engagement. And we're with IDEO U. So IDEO U is one of the very first startups within IDEO. IDEO, for those of you who don't know, is a global design and strategy firm that's been around the world for about 30 years. We're most well known for probably inventing the Apple mouse. I think that's our most famous.
It's the story I tell at cocktail parties. Yeah.
Exactly, me too. But we do everything from redesigning school systems in Peru to inventing new medical devices to improve the way that physicians deliver care. So IDEO U, we started probably a year and a half ago, and our whole mission was to try and help people solve anything creatively. So IDEO is most famous for their human-centered design approach, and what we really wanted to do was get that problem-solving process into the hands of as many people as possible. The way that we're doing it right now is we have 4 courses. You can see them here. Insights for Innovation was the very, very first one that we launched, and this is really about providing people the tool to help them gain deeper insights into customer and client needs. So it's really about how do you become the best design researcher. From Ideas to Action is our second course. It's a lot about prototyping. Storytelling for Influence is how do you tell stories to create a more impact. And then Leading for Creativity was our last course that we've developed. It's actually taught by Tim Brown. And it's how do you, what are those leadership approaches that strategically empower individuals and teams to search for breakthrough solutions?
So who are we? I'm Dave Good. I'm the product manager at IDEO U. And before that, I was at University Now, where we were building our own learning management system from the ground up. So part of why I love NovoEd is that I don't have to build it myself anymore. They've been a really great partner in that respect.
And I'm Em Havens. I still have my same little hair tie on. But I've been working for IDEO U for about a year, and before I was with Open IDEO, which is another one of IDEO's platform organizations where we crowdsource solutions to the world's toughest problems. But background in social finance, MBA, life is good, San Francisco based.
So here's how we're going to walk through the presentation today. We have a few different approaches to course development, and so we're going to go through those one by one. And in each case, we're going to talk about that approach. We're going to talk about the questions that we've tried to answer, the experiments that we've run in order to execute on that approach. We're going to share some of the results of those experiments, and then we're going to talk about the questions that we have going forward, because the point of doing our experiments is to answer some questions and to bring up some new ones. One of the core parts of our course design is design thinking, and we don't just teach it, we practice it. So in all of our courses, we go through these steps of ideating and then prototyping and then iterating so that we're constantly improving the experience and the outcomes of our learners.
So questions that we've been exploring in the development of these different courses are wide and they go deep, and But some of the key ones that we're looking at is how might we create the experience of customization without having to actually customize? How might we create a high-touch, deep experience without having to scale up staffing? How do you design for communities at scale while also driving a community-led experience? And lastly, how might we equip learners to give and receive effective feedback to and from their peers? So for us, questions are a really powerful tool to lead through. So you'll see throughout this, we frame a lot of our challenges and our experiences through questions. And for us, it's a great opportunity to invite new solutions as we ourselves iterate and grow and change.
Mm-hmm. So the first principle I want to talk about is learning by doing. And online education really has this reputation for being a very passive method of learning. And we really want to get people out of their chairs and away from their computers and really learning, like doing stuff and learning it that way. So one of our approaches to execute against this approach, that design philosophy, is designing assignments that get them out into the real world, have them do things. One of the examples is this what's in their bag assignment. So it's about observation and insight into people. So we asked our learners to go out, find somebody, have them dump their backpack or their bag on the table, and what insights can you glean from the person looking at what they have in their bag. Other things we've done are like designing a ritual for your company or leading a brainstorming session. So other ways that they get out into the world. And so what do we learn from some of these experiments? First of all, it takes time to set these up and frame them properly. You have to put a lot of care into how much time is this going to take them, and thinking not just about the time that they're doing the assignment, but the logistics that they're doing to set it up. Set clear expectations and give advance warning of assignments where they're going to have to get away from their computer, especially if they're setting up meetings, because if they're sitting down on Friday night at 11 p.m., that's the hour they've carved out for their education. Nothing's more frustrating than sitting down and being like, here's 10 minutes that you can do right now, and then you're going to have to set up all this other stuff to do in a week. We also try to keep in mind that some of our learners aren't as extroverted as others, and they may have a little bit more of a struggle organizing people or going out and talking to people. And some people actually like the passive nature that's sometimes typical of online education, and they're going to bristle at the additional effort. We hear that, but we also say, well, this is our approach and this is our pedagogy, so you're going to have to enjoy the bounty that we have provided for you. Some questions that we still have. So how might we better capture the process, not just the output? So a lot of times when people are submitting their assignments via the platform, we're really just capturing the output, and the process is really important. So what information can we ask them to document as they're going through those steps that'll be meaningful to the teaching team? And then also a lot of our approach is based on peer feedback in the assignment gallery, where assignments are posted for everyone in the course to see. How do we give enough background context for what the learner was trying to do so that their peers can give effective and informed feedback?
Another design principle that we really use to help shape our courses is learn by teaching. And this manifests in a number of different ways. I think in our actually learning pedagogy, we start with see, we then move into try. The third one is share and reflect. And so one thing that was coming up is that we saw a lot of learners, learn so much in that see and that try, but they're hungry to share and they're hungry to help others go more deeply. And we wanted to support them in supporting each other, while also, for us, one big question that we had is, how do you build really a community-led learning experience, and how do you push more people to collaborate? So we tried out this one experiment, which was to create an alumni coach role. And this is an opportunity for selected alumni of courses to come back for another run of a course that they took, and then be a coach and be a mentor to some of our current learners. For us, it was huge because one of the greatest parts of our course, or the thing that we received really positive feedback on, is when people are receiving feedback on the assignments that they're doing. And so we actually pay 2 teaching team members to be in the course for 10 to 15 hours a week, but they can't reach everybody. We have between 600 to 800 learners in the course, and it's just not feasible for 2 people to be able to give each other feedback. So for us, it was amazing to have these 8 to 10 alumni coaches in the course as these feedback givers. And then what we were finding is it was actually hugely beneficial to them because it gave them an opportunity, one, to engage again with the course material, but then two, go deeper into the course material itself as a coach and as a mentor. The experiment here was, so we did it in a couple of different ways, but the alumni coach role was very cohort based. So like I said, we invite 8 to 10 alumni to come back as coaches and mentors into a next course. When we started, one of the things that we talk about at IDEO that I love so much is that you build in order to think. So we came up with this role, and we came up with this experiment, and we chose people really intentionally who we thought would be open to co-creating this experience with us. We were really honest about how it was something we wanted to try it out to see if the alumni coach role was something that people wanted and to see how it would work. We also made sure that we had lots of opportunities for feedback. So when we say creative communication channels, that is to say we had a Slack channel actually, which is just a way to communicate in real time over message with our alumni coaches. So we were always in contact with these folks in a really useful way. What we learned a lot about shared value. We learned a lot about how sometimes the greatest resources are right under your nose. What's awesome is these guys have so much energy and enthusiasm, and you just need to channel it in the right way. For them, what we learned about the benefit to the alumni coach is it really deepened their learning. It allowed them to connect with other people who were really excited about design thinking and really excited about learning. So we saw some connections that we didn't expect amongst the alumni coaches. Another key learning is how you invite someone really affects how they show up. So one thing that I didn't mention is that we invited our alumni coaches. It framed it as, hey, you are one of our top students who collaborated the most, which we did some data polls and were able to see that. So we invited people to apply, and then they actually had to apply for the position. And that made all the difference, because then people show up in a way where it's an honor and a privilege instead of something like, oh, it's like a volunteer opportunity. And we also, we really emphasized co-creation, but co-creation without actually showing people that their opinion matters is useless, in my opinion. And so some feedback that we really got was that people felt like they were actively contributing and that they were actively being heard. So yeah, that's it, the alumni coaches. I think a couple of questions that we still have as we think about collaboration and scale is, how might we make this 100% learner-led, and how much can we depend on volunteers? And that last thing about listening, like how much can you continue to listen so that we align our alumni coach needs with our needs to create shared value in the future? Learn by collaborating. So this is another really awesome one that we put a lot of time and effort into. And one thing that we're facing is, I think a lot of courses on Novo Ed, you can take you do your team assignments, so everybody does their assignments together in a team. But something that was really important for us is that all assignments were individual. We knew that we wanted that, but we also wanted to add a collaboration element in. So we did a lot of experimenting around teams and groups and how best to set people up for success. And how best to encourage people to collaborate, even though they weren't actually producing content together. So on a really basic level, we actually started with discussion forums, and we changed when we had people comment in the discussion forums, we changed the prompt to, hey, comment on the person's comment below you, to try and encourage that collaboration, that cross-pollination, that conversation amongst students. That worked. That actually, I think that prompt made our discussion forums more lively and more learner-led. One thing with teams to groups is we really emphasized, we made it optional, which was really key. I think in the beginning we forced people to join a team or a group, and that was unsuccessful for us. But we gravitated more towards groups and said, hey, we have these learning circles where you can come together with other learners and give each other feedback on the work that you're doing. which ended up being a much more successful way for people who wanted to be engaged in that way to be able to come together and be engaged. We also offered opportunities and a toolkit for people to be able to meet offline. So what we found is people already were searching for other learners in their city, and then they would meet for a drink or meet for a cup of coffee. And then we saw interest on the platform that people wanted to do that as well, but they didn't know exactly how to make that, like, make the best of their time. So we created a host a learning circle in your city with some clear agendas and some clear outputs of what that might look like. And the third thing is that we gave people multiple options for engagement. So what we saw is that people were interested in connecting with each other, with similar people in their industry, with similar people in their job function, with similar people based on where they were located. So we made it really clear that those were 3 potential avenues to connect in terms of groups that you could join, and that helped. So overview. It's really useful to give people a shared vision or an action plan that teams. So if you don't have that uniting force of creating something together, it's really important to be clear around why do you come together. Feedback, getting networking, or coming together and just like meeting people in your city who are interested in design thinking. The other thing that we're still excited to explore more is meeting face-to-face really felt like this holy grail of online learning, as counterintuitive as that sounds. So it's something that we're continuing to push ourselves on, is what is that blended learning model, and how do you continue, like Dave was mentioning with the assignments, to move from online learning to in-context learning. The last one that I'm going to call out here too is that choice is powerful, yet too many options can be detrimental. And people will do what you tell them to do. So to say, hey, choose one instead of choose multiple. We had the option to join a whole lot of different learning circles or groups, and we found that it got really diluted really quickly, and the energy wasn't focused. Questions we still have. Really, how do we make this more community-led, and how do we continue to enable horizontal leadership?
All right, and the last principle we're going to talk about today is learning through empathy and vulnerability. And we're in a creative field. We work with a lot of creative people. We consider ourselves creative people as well. And people's best work in a creative field comes through being vulnerable and really pushing themselves and exposing themselves, and also empathy for their audience or for their fellow creative types. And so the way we've executed on this on the platform is really trying to promote peer-to-peer discussions and feedback, knowing that that's how they're going to both feel comfortable exposing themselves, but also how they're going to grow in their own understanding of what they're doing by analyzing what other people are doing. So a few different things we've done are promoting the assignment gallery and then some feedback tools. For example, the first thing we started doing in NovoEd, hopefully released this feature not too long ago, but the assignment gallery, which is where everybody's submission is posted and where other users can vote or comment on other learners' submissions. We now open that up day one. So the minute there's an assignment that's submitted, it is in the gallery and it can receive feedback. And there's 2 main purposes of that. The first is inspiring other learners. And so I know that in a higher education or a more traditional educational environment, maybe you don't want people copying off of each other, or there's some, plagiarism problem there. But for us, it's all about inspiration to get people to do their best work. So maybe they're feeling a little bit stuck. They can go to the assignment gallery, see what someone else has done, and feel inspired. And it's also just more opportunity for feedback. The minute the assignment's available, other learners can start looking at it and giving feedback. So we also have a feedback guide, which is a broad philosophical approach to giving constructive feedback. And so that's like a broader mindset, and then the question prompts are specific to each assignment. So we give them this mindset, and then we give them this blueprint for each assignment. So what we've learned is that most learners are going to focus on positive feedback. That's, I think, most people's nature, especially if they don't know someone very well. So we need to give them license to get more constructive. So establishing this expectation and this blueprint for how can you give constructive feedback to your other learners. And we learned that it's hard to establish trust with strangers online. It's a 1-month course. They don't know each other, especially if they're really being vulnerable. We have some pretty intimate assignments in some of our courses where they're writing a letter to their future selves, and that's kind of hard to expose without establishing trust. I think one of our wins is the general feedback guide. That's the mindset, and then the specific questions around the assignments. I think that's a good breakdown. And then one question that we found is really effective is how would you improve your own work based on what you've seen here, which gives them the ability to, instead of feeling like they're attacking the other person, they're saying, well, let me learn what I can from them and apply it to my own learning. And wow, that's really powerful for helping them move forward. So questions we still have for our next iterations are, how can we do virtual trust falls early in the course to establish that community and that trust? And then the next two are similar in that, how can we assess the quality of feedback and incentivize feedback in a way that doesn't water it down? Because if you gamify it or do points or things like that, people are going to start just doing like great job, and it's going to be less, there's more quantity but lower quality.
Yeah, so I think we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. This is our attempt at the key takeaways. One, it's important to explicitly identify how and when community engagement fits into your pedagogy. So recognizing that not the whole course doesn't have to be all about community engagement, but what are those moments that matter for you in this experience?
Where does it feel right?
Yeah, exactly. Where does it feel right? And then test that to make sure that your feeling is the feeling of the learners as well. Accommodating different learning styles when possible. I think this is a key one. As a community designer, as the person who's like building this, it's so important to recognize it doesn't matter to us if everybody's engaged. We know that that's the way to learn the best, or what we've seen, but lots of people have different learning styles. And even if you're not super active on the platform, you could get just as much out of the experience. So that's important for us to pay attention to too. Empower your stars to take some of your workload on. So identifying those bright spots within your community, within your greater network, and trying to really explore what shared value looks like between you and them is a key part and an amazing opportunity for everybody involved. And then give learners the tools to support each other. I think our feedback guide is a great example of that. Our learning circle toolkit is a great example of that. But people are hungry to get out. You just have to give them the right tools to empower them to be successful, or to equip them to be successful. Yeah, that's all we've got. I think, thank you guys so much for having us. It's been awesome to be here. And I know that Drew has been actively capturing some of your amazing questions.
So why don't you guys take a couple minutes or a minute to look through some of these, and then you can figure out which ones you'd like to answer. There's a couple pages.
I'll talk. So there's one that says size matters. Is there a size of online courses that is ideal? This is definitely something we're actively working on. Our classes have been steadily growing in size and are now around 800 to 900 people per course, or per course run. And we feel like we're pushing up against the ceiling of what is effective in a course size wise. If you want a lot of community collaboration, people have started to say it's a little bit noisy, or the discussion threads are too long. If I come in 2 days after it started, I can't catch up. So we're working on this. We don't have a clear point of view on like the ideal size, but we know that we're hitting the max. How about that?
I love this question. Can you clarify what the prompt was that was successful in discussion forums? We went through a couple of different iterations with our discussion forum questions, and what we found was the more open-ended and generative questions solicited the more like vulnerable and real responses. I think in some of our discussion forum questions, it was like, oh, what's the difference between divergent and convergent thinking? And that was one of those things where people are just giving the answer to the question, and those were really unsuccessful. How we grew and how those iterated, they ended up being more like focused on you and your experience with brainstorming, or how much you go back and apply this to your team. The key thing that changed the activity in the discussion forums was prompting people to comment on the comment below them. So to say, hey, like answer this question and then make sure to respond to the person below you. It's one of those things where if you create the road, people will walk on the road.
Yeah.
Some other questions.
Oh, are your courses blended asynchronous? Can you talk about the format of your courses? That's a great question. So we very intentionally have our courses run for 5 weeks at a time. There's a start date and there's an end date. And with all 4 courses, they generally don't overlap for those that want to take them one after another.
Mm-hmm. And there's one about a question of how to capture the learner's process in doing the assignments. How have we done that, or what are our thoughts? So what we do right now, and I'll just as an example, we have a prototyping course called From Ideas to Action, where during the course of the course, you come up with a problem you're trying to solve and start prototyping and iterating. And with each prototype, you're supposed to ask certain questions and prioritize them. So what we do is we have part of an assignment where we say, like, what questions are you trying to answer in general? And then we say, and then what are your top 3 that you're going to try to answer with this prototype? And then they actually share the prototype. So we try to capture some of the thought process they went through and what they're trying to answer with that specific prototype. And then hopefully they then share it, share the feedback they've gotten from others, and then share again what questions they now want to answer based on the process that they just went through.
That's awesome. This is a great suggestion / question. Can an automated system be created for the alumni coaches sharing their personal learning journey through voice or video or text online, which potential learners can access before even taking the course to see how much their needs line up with alumni experiences? It's definitely something that we've been thinking a lot about, and that people are requesting. What is the impact of your course? What is an example of what success looks like through these courses? Right now in the course, one way that we've been experimenting with this is we have our alumni coaches post their old assignments so that learners can actually see the journey of what you will create throughout. And we found that that's been super useful to have an example of what good looks like from an assignment, and then also to be able to look at the final assignment from the get-go and say, oh, okay, so this is what I'm working towards, or this is one potential option. But we're always looking for impact stories, and I think it's definitely on our in the queue.
And I think answering a related question that wasn't asked about, we actually do a pre-course survey where we have a few different learner profiles, and we try to get our learners to self-select a little bit into different profiles, and we're toying with the idea of how can we support different profiles differently during, like, some of them want a lot of feedback, some of them they just want to burn through it without getting a lot of feedback. So how can we target our efforts effectively based on the groups that the learners have selected themselves into?
Yeah. This is a great question. If there is time, I'd love to hear examples of virtual trust falls. I love that idea. We love that idea too. I think so this is really simple, but the way that virtual trust falls show up for us right now is we have a getting started section before you jump into any of the lessons. And there's one page that you can go to that's called Meet Your Community. And we prompt people to say, hey, introduce yourself, say where you're from and why you're here, and be sure to welcome the person below you. And so as silly as that sounds, it goes back to this philosophy of, like, how you invite people and how you welcome people is how they're going to show up and how they're going to encourage it. So for that's probably our most popular discussion forum prompt, and we make sure that all alumni coaches and all teaching team members go in, and every single person who introduces themselves on that thread gets a welcome. We also really emphasize we have our alumni coaches and our teaching team at people and connect like-minded people, or do that cross-pollination work in a way that is core to the community.
Cool.
And I think we're just out of time now, so thank you guys so much for being here. And those are our emails if you want to reach out directly to us with any questions that come up, or any ideas or any suggestions for the future.
And we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar. And thank you, Dave and Em, for taking your time today.
Thanks.
This is awesome. Thanks.